Hi, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. In this week's guitar lesson, we're going to take a look at this very simple melody, and we're going to break it down, and I'm going to show you where it all comes from. These are coming from basic chord shapes. I wasn't really thinking about scales as I was doing this. I was just thinking about chords and different voicings and how we can target certain notes within those chords. So by the end of this, you're going to understand how it works, and you'll be able to play it. It's a great way to practice. So I've got the lesson split into two parts. In this video, we'll take a look at the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half and download the tablature and the on-screen tab viewer, access that, where you can slow down, playback, and loop sections and all of that. You can get those things by going to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP377. All right, so the lead that I'm playing this week is very simple, kind of elegant sounding, almost fragile, and that's because it's just this, this lead that's floating out there by itself. There's no support underneath it. There's no chords, there's no jam tracks, no other musicians playing. And it's up to me when I'm playing that melody to really target those chord tones to pull out something from nothing. And so this actually, is simple as it is, this is a really, really good practice for you to understand your entire fretboard, understand chords and different voicings, and how to target chord tones out and pull notes out of those chords. That's really what we're doing. So I'm not thinking so much about scales as I'm playing this. I'm really just thinking about the chords in different positions. And so we're going to explain all of that through this lesson. Now let me just mention this guitar because I always get questions when I'm playing this. This is a Martin CEO 7. And it's a smaller bodied, it's not a parlor, but it's definitely smaller guitar. And it's very comfortable. It's actually kind of the perfect size. That's why I got the guitar in the first place. When I picked it up, it's like, wow, it just fits. It doesn't feel like a dreadnought or something where you're uncomfortable. Anyway, that's what this is. I have a love-hate relationship with this guitar. I haven't used it in a while. I've got another Martin that I kind of fell in love with, but then I put new strings on this yesterday. Oh, and it's just killer. So now I'm back in love with this one. This is what we do, I guess, with our guitars. I'm fickle like that. So let's talk about this song in terms of structure. So let's go through the chords. We'll go through this quickly, and then I'll get into the specifics. So the song is played in the key of G, and the chords are G, there's an E, actually an E7, A7, and then a D7. That's what we're going to cycle through. Now, for those of you that know your chord family and know the chords that live within the chord family of G, you're probably already confused because the next chord, the 2 chord, would be a minor. So the A would be an A minor, then you have a B minor and so forth. So why did I say A7, which is a major chord? Well, that's because we're dealing with secondary dominant chords. And I covered this in a lesson a few weeks ago, which was EP370. So you can go back to that and refer back to secondary dominance if you want. But a quick summary of what's going on here. We go from a G to an E7. Well, E is the 5 of what? E is the 5 of A. Okay, well wait, A is not in the chord family, so what is A the 5 of? Oh, it's the 5 of D. And then wait, what's D the 5 of? Oh yeah, it's the 5 of G, which is your 1. So really all this is a series of 5 chords. So we're starting with the 1, and then we go to the 5 of the 5. Did I say that right? And then you go to the 5. Anyway, that's what's going on there, is you're using secondary dominant chords. It's all explained in EP370. But you don't need to know that for this. You just need to know those are the chords we're trying to target. So you can write those down. It's G, E, A, D. And you can write G, E7, A7, D7. Some people always ask, why the 7? Like, how do you know which one of those to use? Which number? And the truth is, as long as it's a major chord, it doesn't really matter. So I could have played E9, I could have played an E7, I could have played an E6. It can be any of those versions of the chord, as long as it's a major chord. You couldn't go into the minor thing. Okay, so we're starting with a G chord. Now for this, I'm sliding right into this G chord up here, and that's the G chord using the E chord shape. When I say that, I'm talking about the caged system, C-A-G-E-D. You can go to EP273 and learn about that if you don't know what that means. But these 3 fingers are making up the E shape. So I was picturing that chord shape, and actually I was picturing the top part of that chord shape, actually, the little triad up here. So I walked into that triad. And once you can picture those chord shapes, and this is the value to me of this lesson, because when I think of a G, I don't think of just a G like this. I think of Gs all over the place. all over the fretboard, and different places, little triads, full chords, you know. So that's how you need to think about the fretboard. And once you get to that level, then when you're playing a melody like this, you can start to picture different versions of those G chords and what you can do with them. So this is a harmonized third that lives in that G chord. So it starts with the open G, third string, second fret, and then we go up to the fourth fret on the third string. And then index finger goes down on the third fret, second string. And I kind of slid into that. So I slid right up into this chord shape. That's all I was doing. Now the next chord is the E chord. And so I immediately am presented with all of these options for what I can play. I start thinking about, I've got an E, I've got an E7 here, I've got an E7 here, I've got an E chord here, I've got an E7 here. I've got all these versions for what I can play, but when my brain is processing this, I'm thinking down here in this neighborhood. I'm not going to jump to a different zip code because that's just, I could, but that becomes too complicated. And so this is where learning your chord shapes starts to become really valuable, because when I can picture this G chord and then I can immediately see an E chord here, right, look how close they are together. I can just pivot my fingers and start to pull notes out of those different chord shapes. So here's what I did. I came up to this E7 up here. So let me show you how to play this E7. This is just make a C chord where you've got your index finger down on the 5th fret, second string. Make a C chord like you would in first position. That's what I mean. And then add your pinky to the 7th fret, 4th string. But play those middle 4 strings. That's an E7. You have to know this you have to know this 7 chord shape, because you can slide into it. It's used all the time in blues. It's just a very versatile chord, and it's super easy to grab because you already know how to make a C chord, right? So you're just doing the same thing here. Okay, so we have this, and then I walked it up. My index finger. All I was trying to do was get to this E note. I knew this was an E note. And here's another little sidebar, very quick tip for you. When you think about the D chord shape, so that I'm playing an E chord here using the D shape, right? Like we do in first position. If you picture that as a little triangle, whatever the tip of the triangle is, in that case it would be that note, that's the name of the chord. So think about what I'm saying there. So if I'm playing a D chord, this note is not a D, this note is not a D, but this note is a D. So I could picture that. I could picture that note as being that. And I also know if I can play that, that's the top of this C7 shape, which is actually the E7 chord. So now you can know if you're playing this chord, whatever your index finger's on, that's the name of the chord. Okay, so let's back it up. And then I played the chord. And now we're going to go to an A, or an A7. Now look at the options I have. I could play right there, that's an A7. But what I ended up doing was just to keep the melody line moving. So I went and walked it back down. So I came down to this A7 position. So you can see we're not talking scales here, we're talking chord shapes. So I'm using chromatics. That's where you fill in every fret along the way. I'm just hitting them all on the way down to where I'm trying to get, which is this note, which is one of the notes in the chord, the A7 chord. So I come to the 2nd fret, 2nd string, and then my ring finger goes down to the 3rd fret, 1st string, plays that G note. Now, those two notes are just notes in the A7 chord. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I went, so what I'm doing there, slide from the 3rd to the 5th fret on the 1st string, back to the 3rd fret, and then 5th fret, 2nd string. So now I'm playing these two notes, and I know of this as being an A7. I think of it that way. So you have like an A7, you have like an A7. So even though it's just two notes, it's really defining because you've got this note, which is the note, you know, the 7 note in a dominant 7 chord. Okay, so once I come into this, I go and slide that up. Now watch this. So this will be, we're going to slide it up to where your index finger's on the 5th fret, 2nd string. But what is that? Why did I come up here? Well, the next chord was the D chord, remember? So we go from the A7 to the D. So I know that I have this D chord shape right here, this little D triad. And so you can think of that as the A chord shape at a caged, where you're straddling basically the 7th fret and the 5th fret. I think of it that way. You've got one finger on each of those frets. You can play it like this, or you can play it like this. That's kind of the top part of that A shape. That's how I define it anyway. So I just walked from that A7 up to that D chord. And then I hit the open D string. I knew that was an option, right? And then I went. Now that's cool, because all I'm doing is I'm going into a D7 chord. And so I was thinking about your A shape like this, the top part of your A shape anyway. And I know that if I play it like this, I'm playing a 7 version of that chord. And you can just take that shape, and you can, where your middle finger is, you go down to the 6th fret and then down to the 5th fret. And you're walking it down to the 7. Now that may be confusing. Hopefully it's not. I'm trying to clear this up as best I can. But that's a D7 using a little triad there. So I was just thinking, while I'm up here in this D world, I'm just going to go ahead and go to that 7. Now why the 7? Remember, the 7 is a good transition chord to get you. It pulls your ear back to the 1 chord. You want to hear that resolve, right? And then it goes to the 1 and it resolves. It feels good to release that tension. Let's back it up from the beginning and play it up to that point. So we have, and remember, this is a waltz. So it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 2. Okay, and then we go back to the 1 chord, and I went just like I started again. Open G, 2nd fret, 3rd string. And then we slide into that harmonized 3rd, just like we started. Now watch this. And that's how we turn it around. Now I love this because while I'm playing this harmonized 3rd for the G, I've got these 2 fingers here. I've got my ring finger and my pinky are free to do other things and to embellish around that. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm putting my ring finger down on the 5th fret, 3rd string, then taking it off. Now I'm hitting strings 2 and 3 as I do that. What is that? That's a G sus 4 chord, right? And the sus chords are really, really powerful because they allow you to do these great little embellishments. So you could do something like, here's just a quick example where you can use it in like a country feel. Go to the 4. It's just a nice way to sort of accent that chord, I guess. So that's what I was doing. And then we played the D7. Now I'm using that same shape we played for that E7 chord, but if I play it down here, 2 frets this way, it's a D7. Why did I play that? Well, it was just right there. My fingers were there. I could have went, right? Or, you know, any version. But I try and find something close by. All right, so now we're going to cycle through the same chords in the same order. So we're going to go back to the G. I went to the E7. Now look at this. So I'm going to play the 3rd fret 2nd string, 5th fret 2nd string, and slide all the way up here to the 8th fret on the 2nd string. Why this note? Because of what I just mentioned about the triangle and the tip of the triangle. So think about that. So if I know that's a G chord up here using that D shape. So that's a G note that I'm targeting there, which I know is in the chord. Hitting that note, and then I'm going to walk it down. And that's using the chromatic thing again. That's where I don't necessarily care if these notes are in the scale or in the key. If I know I'm just going a short distance and I don't overplay this hand, I can just fill in all the notes in between, color in between the lines there. So I walk it down to the 5th fret 2nd string, which we've already talked about as the E, because remember now we're going to the E7. So I'm going to make that same E7 chord shape, but I'm just going to play the notes a little out of order. So I'm going to play the 2nd string, 4th string, 3rd string. It just has kind of a pretty kind of chimey sound. All right, so the second time through, we'll start on the D7. I went, there's the E7, and now we're gonna go to the A, and so I just went to this A right here, this A7. And so what I'm doing is I'm sliding into the third of the chord, so starting on the 5th fret 3rd string, sliding to the 6th fret 3rd string, 5th fret 2nd string, up to the 8th fret 2nd string. And then I come up to this note, which is the 7th fret 2nd string. Now that would be the second out of the major scale. 1, 2. So that's why that note. But I just know that note as a note that fits in if I'm kind of arpeggiating a chord like this, pulling the notes out. That lick I use quite a bit. It's just a really pretty sound. And I got that lick from Mark Knopfler. There was an album that he did with Chet Atkins in the 90s called Neck and Neck. And I remember this one lick that goes something like that. It just stuck with me. So that's, and this is the value of licks. Once you learn a lick, it's just a vocabulary word. You can use that. I can take it. It was Mark's. Mark got it from somebody else. You know, that's just how it works. So we're going to walk it right up to that note, and then we're going to walk it down chromatically again. 6th fret, 5th fret on the 1st string, and then 5th fret 2nd string. So you're going to have to kind of jump that index finger down to that note. And that all represents the A chord. Now where do we go after this? Oh, we go to the D, remember? Now what I played here, now that should sound familiar, that sound, because remember when we played over the A7, we used that same thing. I'm doing this, I'm just repurposing. So now I'm thinking about the D chord using that A7 chord shape. So remember we played the A7 down here. Well, if I play it up here, it's a D7. Here's a quick little sidebar that can totally light up some light bulbs out there for some of you. If you think of your chord shape like this, you know, the A chord shape, so I'm playing a D chord using the A shape. Where my pinky is, you may use your ring finger there, but if I bar that, and then I go 1 fret higher than that on the 1st string, I'm playing the 7 version of that chord. I remember discovering that and that being a big deal to me, because now I can very quickly get to that 7 chord shape. Okay. So I played that, the D7, and then I went back to the G. Now what is this? So I'm barring the first 3 strings on the 7th fret, but playing the open 4th string. That's a D6 chord. This is another takeaway. So if you think about this, back to this chord shape, I always tie it back to chord shape. If we're back to that A shape, chord shape, playing the D chord. That's your D7 chord. If I play like this, I'm playing a D6. And if I walk that down 2 frets, I'm playing a D9. So now you've got your 7, your dominant 7, your 6, and your 9. And listen how musically it's like walking right down to get you back to the 1 chord. But I didn't walk it down. I just went, held that twice, and then down to the G chord. And the last embellishment I played over the G chord goes. So I'm playing the G chord like this using 4 strings. So it's the same as your bar chord, but I'm not even bothering with the bottom 2 strings. That frees my pinky up to go, which is what I'm using for that lick. 1 string, put my pinky down on the 5th fret 2nd string, lift it, and then just walk down the chord. It's a really pretty sound. Now that's as far as I want to get in this first part. There's another section to this song which I'm going to save for the part 2 video, but let me back up and play through this first part one more time slowly, just so you have this as a reference. If you got questions, you can always leave them in the comments. I try and answer them. If I don't answer them, somebody else will answer them. So don't go out there like totally confused. Like, ask questions. It's very helpful. And if you're not a premium member yet, do it. Just look into it. At least look into it. It's a very affordable way to become a good improviser on guitar. That's what the mission is. It's to teach you how to memorize, or to improvise, not memorize. Okay, so here we go from the beginning. We have